Yeah, good.
So good afternoon, welcome to the afternoon session of the Planning Development Control Committee. It's Wednesday the 16th of February and it's 2 o'clock. Just a few reminders to members of the public that we're not expecting a fire drill today, so if you hear the alarm go, then that's for real. And please obey any instructions you're given, don't use the lift, and the assembly point is in Abbey Gardens. This application is being recorded and live streamed on the Council's website, and in addition it's also being televised, and that will be uploaded to the Council's YouTube after the meeting, where it will stay. We've changed the arrangements and the sort of slight relaxation of the rules, so the public participation is now any of the microphones that you see in front of you, and if you wish to sanitise your mic, you're very welcome to do so. There are some sanitising wipes there. Please could you remember to turn off your mobile phones or put them on silent. And then the committee is sitting down the two wings and they've all got their name in front of them. Then we have Julie Pinnock, who's the service lead for the built environment, Catherine Knight, who's our legal representative, and Claire Buchanan, who is operating the timer, and you can see the clock in front of her, and also taking the minutes of the meeting. So we'll start with agenda item 11. Thank you everybody for being here slightly earlier than perhaps you expected to be. This is 21/02899/FUL, the erection of a C3 dwelling house with associated works and demolition of a single-storey side extension to facilitate a new access at Smoke Acre Crossway, Shawford in Winchester. The case officer is Sean Quigley, who's sitting in the seat over there. So when you're ready, Sean, we're ready to hear your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. As you said, an application for a new dwelling following the subdivision of an existing residential plot, a large detached house known as Smoke Acre. The site's hatched there on the plan you can see. The host property is to the north, Smoke Acre. That's from the Council's GIS system showing the Smoke Acre plot in the centre. An aerial shot, again showing Smoke Acre in the middle and its relationship with the properties either side. This is a slide showing the proposed block plan, Smoke Acre again at the top, the proposed 4-bedroom detached house in the subdivided plot to the south, again showing its relationship with the properties either side. North and west elevations. It's quite a modern design, off-white render with timber-clad elements, below a slate roof with grey aluminium windows. South and east elevations showing obscure glazing on the eastern side, which is the closest part to other properties. Floor plans, ground and first. That's a photograph of the host property right in front of Smoke Acre on Cross Lane. The existing extension on the right hand side of the building, that's the one to be demolished to facilitate the access, which will go on in the vicinity of this photograph. We'll probably refer to it later, but that's the street tree on the highway owned verge. which will need to be removed to facilitate the access for this property. That's a wider shot showing the street tree again and the vicinity of the access with Smoke Acre beyond. That's from the other side, further up Crossway, showing the access and the street tree. That's from within the site, so that's at the bottom of the plot in the vicinity of the proposed house, looking back towards the host property, and that's from the host property looking back down towards the application site. The tree in that shot will be retained within the garden of the existing Smoke Acre property, and the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We move now to the public participation, and the first speaker is an objector, Alice Drew, who is speaking from the Southern Planning Practice on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Fuller. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Chair.
And when you're ready, the clock is over there, and you have 3 minutes. Can you see the clock?
No, I can't, but I'm sure it'll be fine.
Can you just move the 3 o'clock so that...
Thank you.
Okay.
Quite large.
Thank you.
Okay.
Brilliant. Thank
Yeah.
you.
When you're ready.
Good afternoon, councillors. My name is Alice Drew and I'm the Principal Planning Consultant at Southern Planning Practice. I'm representing Mr and Mrs Fuller, who reside at Summershores next to Smoke Acre, and strongly object to the application before you today. At present, there is no backland development or subdivisions at the southern section of the Crossway, which have resulted in an awkward arrangement of built form in the area. The proposals would result in a tandem style development which would be out of character with the siting and orientation of the established pattern of development. This concern was highlighted by the council in the pre-application response. The proposed dwelling will have a detrimental impact on the character and appearance of the surrounding area. Therefore, the proposed development is contrary to policy DM15 and DM16, which require new development to respond positively to the character and appearance of the area in terms of its design, scale and layout. The tree which is proposed to be removed to facilitate access is located on highways land. Its removal would have a detrimental impact on the character and appearance of the street scene. This is confirmed by the tree officer, who considers that the tree has significant amenity value and makes a valuable contribution to the character of the area. It's been stated that the amended design reduced the size of the dwelling to reduce its visual impact. However, the amendments were very minor and do not overcome the adverse visual impact of the dwelling and views from neighbouring properties. The proposed contemporary design is not in keeping with the surrounding area and would result in jarring architecture which would be out of keeping with the existing built form in Shawford. The proposed dwelling is located only 3 metres from the boundary, which would directly overlook my client's property and their rear garden. The proposed orientation of the dwelling along the boundary of Summershores further increases the level of intrusion and overlooking. It would therefore have a substantial and overwhelming impact on Mr and Mrs Fuller's residential amenity space, to the point where they would feel that they were being constantly overlooked. It is simply not true that the impact of the proposed dwelling on the neighbouring properties would not be significant, as stated in the officer's report. As such, the proposed development is contrary to policy DM17, which requires new development not to have an unacceptable adverse impact on adjoining land by reason of overlooking, overshadowing or by being overbearing. The proposals are also contrary to the high quality spaces supplementary planning document, which seeks to ensure new development does not have a detrimental impact on adjoining land, in particular neighbouring properties and their gardens. No soft landscaping has been proposed on the boundary to seek to mitigate overlooking. The proposals would result in significant, unacceptable adverse impacts on the neighbouring amenity space. The proposal is contrary to the development plan and should therefore be refused. At the very least, the application should be deferred for members to undertake a site visit. I urge members to uphold the local planning policies and refuse the application.
Thank you very much. Stay there, please, because there might be some questions and clarification from the members of the committee. Councillor Rutter.
Thank you. You mentioned that a tree is coming down in the verge to enable the access, but I understand from the documents in front of us that there will be a replacement tree planted either in that verge or opposite. And also there is a condition that talks about planting 3 extra heavy standard trees on the northern border boundary and other landscaping details which presumably would help to mitigate the views of this new house. Have you not taken these into consideration?
So I haven't seen that there's any soft landscaping proposed on the boundary between Smokeacre and my client's property, Summer Shores. So I don't know if the case has clarified if there is anything proposed along there, but I haven't seen the plans that would propose any such soft landscaping features.
So we can look at that in conditions. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Members, anybody else like to ask a supplementary? No. So thank you very much indeed for coming along. The next public speaker we have is Councillor Francis Strange. Good afternoon. That's it, got it. So when you're ready, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Compton and Shoreford Parish Council object to the development on the following grounds. The mature tree on the verge directly in front of the proposed driveway is located on highways land. It is the Highways Authority's decision whether or not this is removed to facilitate access, and their permission has apparently not been sought. The tree officer does not support the removal of the tree on Crossway, as he considers it has significant amenity value and makes a valuable contribution to the character of the area. As such, the proposed removal of the tree to facilitate the access to the proposed development is considered inappropriate. It should be noted that a request to place a TPO on the tree has been submitted for consideration to the Natural Environment team at the Council. Due regard should be given to this pending application, and it is requested that planning is not determined until the application for the TPO has been decided. No ecological survey work has been undertaken to assess the value of the site potential for protected species to use the existing garden for foraging. The proposed dwelling will have a detrimental impact on the character and appearance of the area, and its design is not in keeping with the surrounding housing types. There are also overlooking issues for both neighbours. The boundary issue remains unresolved. 2 documents with a plan have been made available which provide a more accurate sizing of the next door gatehouse plot. The map indicates that the plot is 110 feet wide at the south. The existing measurement is 94 feet across the lawn from the western boundary to the wire mesh fence, and therefore the gatehouse plot actually extends a further 16 feet past the wire mesh fence, encompassing the hedge. This mature hedge between the 2 properties is shown as within the Smokeacre red boundary line and belonging to the Smokeacre plot. This is now shown not to be accurate, and the boundary issue continues in dispute. If the committee is minded to accept, then stringent conditions should be set to reduce the impact on the neighbourhood and local residents. The new driveway is very close to the neighbour on the west and will cause additional noise and should be laid to minimise noise using a resin or tarmac surface and not gravel. Contractors should not be allowed to park on the road or the verges, as this would cause danger to other road users and pedestrians, as well as damage to the road infrastructure. All contractors' vehicles should be contained within the site. All deliveries should be coordinated with access via suitable roads, not necessarily those that the sat-nav suggests. Deliveries should be restricted to before 9:30 AM in order not to block roads during peak hours. Otherwise, significant local disruption would be caused, with the associated restriction of and danger to emergency vehicles, especially where access is vital to the continuing medical needs of a neighbour. All building works, including demolition, construction, machinery or plant operation, should only be carried out between the hours of 08:30 and 1700 hours Monday to Friday and 08:30 and 1200 hours Saturday, not Sundays or recognised public holidays. Protective measures must be installed, inspected and deemed appropriate to ensure protection and long-term viability of retained trees and to minimise the impact of construction activity.
Thank you.
Sorry,
That's it. Well done.
sentence.
Thank you. Any questions or clarification for Councillor Strange? Councillor Reid?
Thank you. Welcome, Councillor Strange. You indicated a TPO has been applied for.
Yes.
Do you know when that was applied?
When the application was first made and it was raised with the tree officer.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Lamy?
Yes, I noticed in your discussion then that about the delivery of vehicles and that. I do know that that is a very narrow road. Did you have lots of instances with the other developments along that road, on the road being blocked?
Yes, we certainly did. The road is actually not wide enough for two large cars to pass each other. They have to pull into people's driveways. It's extremely narrow. And all the other developments that have been along that road have actually caused major problems for the residents there. Thank you.
I think that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming along. Next we have Ward Councillor, Councillor.
Sorry, I forgot the microphone. Next we have Ward Councillor, Councillor John Warwick. And when you're ready, Councillor Warwick, you have 5 minutes. Clock. Can you see the clock?
Thank
you, Chairman, and that's perfect. Thank you so much, Chairman, for allowing me to speak today. I wish to reinforce the concerns of the Compton and Shawford Parish Council and residents from Crossway and South Down. There is a concern that this development will change the dynamics of the area and that the proposal is out of line with the Compton and Shawford Village Design Statement. The Parish Council has worked closely with the City Council on all sorts of planning matters, and they are rightly proud of and are currently updating their 2011 Village Design Statement. Local residents wish to preserve the low density character of this area. This is a back garden development, and that will change the character and directly overlook the 2 neighbouring properties. This is why we have 23 letters of objection, including from the Parish Council themselves and the South Down Residents Association. Crossway, as many of you know, is a narrow residential lane characterised by large detached houses, but located in substantial gardens and described in the Village Design Statement as standing in a linear relationship set well back from the road. So I would challenge the statement that this proposal fits well with the surrounding context. The new dwelling is a back garden development, unlike any of the other houses along the southern aspect of Crossway. I'm also concerned there may be a presumption to cut down the mature white beam tree and the only tree on the Hampshire Highways verge at Crossway. In the view of our own principal tree officer, this tree has significant amenity value and makes a contribution to the character of the area. Hampshire County Council, as at 7:30 this morning, had not given permission to remove this tree, and I don't need to spell out to you the concern around cutting down a mature, healthy native tree during a climate emergency. Our own high quality places supplementary planning document has a whole chapter on the importance of preserving trees and states that the first principle is that trees make a positive contribution should be retained wherever possible. I appreciate the interpretation of our own local plan policies is subjective, but I believe this proposal contravenes 3 of our key policies. Our policies DM15 and 16 outline how new development should respond to the local context and that communities will produce village design statements. And without proper weight given to our village design statements, how else do we measure the local context? Our policies state that new development should connect seamlessly to surrounding development in terms of layout, scale and space. So contrary to both policies DM15 and 16, the location, design and orientation of this new property will be at odds with every neighbouring linear building line, and the modern design will be at odds with the traditional style of building in this area. The new building may not be fully visible from the road, but it will be visible from the neighbouring properties and sets a precedent for change to the area. Our policy DM15 draws attention to distinctiveness and requires us to give regards to the cumulative effects of developments on the character of the area. Densely packed back garden plots will change the distinct character of the area for future generations. It is an important consideration, and our greatest concern should be the impact of this development on the immediate neighbours, and contrary to our own policy DM17, says that development should not have an adverse impact on adjoining land by reason of overlooking, overshadow or overbearing. The immediate neighbours, Mr and Mrs Pridham at the Gatehouse and Mr and Mrs Fuller at Summer Shores, have written to you, and Mrs Pridham gave me permission yesterday evening to share her concerns with you by email. So both neighbouring households understand they will be subject to the direct daily impact of building work, noise, contractor parking and verge damage, but most importantly they will both be affected forever by overlooking from a new dwelling that will affect the private enjoyment of their own homes and gardens. The gatehouse will have a new driveway running the length of their property and garden, and Summer Shores will have a house right up to their garden boundary with no mitigation measures to reduce the impact of this significant new dwelling. So Chairman, I agree a site visit may be helpful, but I would also urge you to support the views of our residents, their own design statement and our own policies, and refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Councillor Warwick? Councillor Levy?
You may wish to enlighten us a bit more about the developments on the other side, because I seem to remember that they wish to build garages at the bottom of their gardens, which were rather large, and that was turned down by this committee and also refused their fee, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Councillor Lambing. So it was really important on that side of the road, the linear development style of those housing. And to be fair, every single house follows quite a distinct line. And we refused permission for a back garden development in the next door's properties for exactly that reason. We were going to tunnel garages and all sorts. I think you and I both spoke about that. And it's now linear development, and following on from that, even the new development is in a very traditional style. So the original houses in that plot were built in the 1930s. The newer ones blend in really nicely. So it's the style as well as the positioning, which is important. Thank you.
Any more questions? No? Thank you very much. Thank you for doing a bit of cleaning at the same time.
I know my taste.
Sean, anything you want to add on what the topic speakers? I don't know what it is, but it's got a blind spot about the agent. I'm so sorry, Mr. Dunn, and you're on for the second time today, and you are the agent and supporting the application. And you know the routine.
I do by now.
Been here before, and when you're ready, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you for allowing me to address you again today, members. As you can see, your officers have carefully assessed our proposals and concluded quite rightly in our view that the proposed dwelling will not have a material impact on the street scene and will not be visible from Crossway or the public realm. The recommendation to approve is actually consistent with Council's other decisions in the immediate area where similar plots can be found. I'm hoping there's a plan that will be appearing on the screen at the moment that I've asked for, which shows the other plots within the immediate vicinity of the site. And that includes a plot to the rear of Carter's house, Carter's land, which is called Carter's house, 2 houses approved to the rear of Magdalen Lodge, 4 houses approved and built at the rear of Overcross House, 3 houses approved and built at the rear of Little Ropers.
Mr. Jobbins, I'm going to stop you there because we'll have the plan up, which is already a question. All right, so the officers don't have the plan. Right, okay, so we'll just carry on. I will give you a little bit extra time, and we'll assume that there are other plots in the neighbourhood, but you're giving us the list.
Thank you, Chairman, and I'm sure members will be very aware that there are very similar backland plots even to the rear of our plot. There are 2 houses approved within very similar locations. Perhaps the most comparable one is at the rear of Carter's land, which is directly comparable with our proposals. Therefore, they will be a little different in terms of plot size, ratio, and contrary to objective suggestions, will not be visible from Crossway due to the existing dwelling, the dense hedging, and the offset nature of the plot. With regard to the tree, again, I'd had some photos I was hoping to show you, which shows the fact that the tree, certainly in our view and our tree consultant's view, is category C. It's not a significant tree, but also it's actually got quite a number of wounds on it, so its longevity is somewhat in doubt. In contrast, however, we are proposing 3 extra heavy standard indigenous trees, oak or beech or similar, which would be far, far better in terms of the visual contribution they would make to Crossway and the wider area. But that can obviously be secured by condition, and of course those trees could be TPO'd, and I would support that. In terms of the impact on neighbours, there are 2 bathroom windows which are shown to be obscure glazed. There is no material impact upon the neighbours in our view, and that obviously concurs with the assessment of your planning officers. I would like to end with a quote from your planning officer's report, and forgive me for doing that, but the development is recommended for permission as it is in an area identified in the local plan where proposals for redevelopment will be supported, will not have a significant detrimental impact on the character and appearance of the area or on the amenities of neighbouring occupiers. And that is exactly the case here. Unfortunately, the plan that I was hoping to show you is not available, but that makes very clear that the character of the area is changing and is very diverse. Thank you.
Have you finished? Because I did interrupt you. Have you said everything?
No, that's fine. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. So, any questions or clarification? Councillor Reid and Councillor Lehman.
Good morning, once again.
Hello.
The trees, you said oak and beech as replacement trees possible. Whereabouts would you be situating those?
Well, through Madam Chairman, the suggestion is they'll be planted in the front garden of Smokeacre. So if you look at you see the hedge in the photo up on the screen, directly behind the hedge.
Okay, the only trouble with those 2 sets of trees is their root extensions. They're surface rooters.
So through Madam Chairman, oak and beech was simply a suggestion of what they could be. Obviously, we need to agree the trees with your planning officers and tree officer.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Lehman?
Yeah, along that side of the road, there are no houses that have been built in the rear of any of the plots. Cartlands is on the corner, so it doesn't really apply to what you're saying from that, unless you show something different.
Like I said, I'm looking at a slightly wider area because one has to look at the character of the area generally. As I've already mentioned, there are 2 plots approved directly behind the application site, which are backland plots, and Carter's house again. But like our proposals, none of these are necessarily viewed in the street scene, in the context of the street scene. Thank you.
No, but I'm concerned looking at plans, the way it overlooks either side of the plot.
Well, as I said, Madam Chairman, there are obscure glazed windows to the first room bathroom windows.
Thank you, Chair. Can we go back to the landscaping plan? So you're proposing to put in 3 large trees somewhere at the front of Smokeacre, presumably to help screen the new house from Crossway. What landscaping proposals do you have to screen the new house from Summershaws and Gatehouse, please?
Again, as we mentioned, in terms of the trees frontage, there really is replacement or compensation for a lot of the tree on the frontage, highway frontage. They're not intended to screen the development. And in terms of landscaping proposals, there could be additional planting along the boundary, there could be planting within the garden of the new property itself. But again, we would fully expect there to be a condition requiring those details to be agreed in advance.
Thank you. That in fact is conditional 4. But is there room for 3 extra heavy standard trees on the northern boundary?
Well, through mention, we believe so, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Any more questions? No. So thank you very much for coming along today. Sorry, I nearly forgot you. Right, so, sure, anything you want to tell us?
Well, as the discussion so far has indicated, there's 2 broad issues: the effect of this development on the character and appearance of the area and the impact of the development on neighbours. I think the key part of this is the character and appearance of this area is as experienced from the public domain, i.e. from Crossway. If and when this development takes place, the appearance of the appearance of that development from Crossway, in fact you can't see it. You would see the drive, but you wouldn't see the dwelling at all because it's behind an existing house. So the character of the area as experienced from the public domain would not change. I think that's an important point. Secondly, I don't say, of course, that the amenities of neighbours will not be affected, because they will be, because there's a 4-bedroom detached house going in an area where there was no development before. My job is to assess the significance of that impact in the context of a local plan which says in this area this kind of development in principle is acceptable, because this is an area which is a developed area where housing is expected to take place. Redevelopments of this kind are supposed to take place where they do not have an unacceptable impact on amenity. And as my report concludes, that's the case. Not that it has no impact, but that impact is not so significant as to justify a refusal of planning permission.
So we move now on to our report, which starts on page 179, Principle of Development. Sean, Councillor Warwick mentioned, I think several times, about this being back land development. Do you want to comment on that?
Well, it is, yes, it is back land development. It's tandem development, which is quite common in a suburban area. If I have to make a case for it, is, as I previously mentioned, that the experience of the area from the public domain, where most people would experience it, remains unchanged.
Okay, thank you. So we move on then to the next heading, Impact on the Character and Appearance of the Area, which starts on page 178 and goes on until 181. Any questions on that? Councillor Rutter?
Thank you. I can see that the removal of that white bin, even if it is a substandard example of the species, will have an impact on the character of the area, as seen from the road, crossroad. But you're proposing that 3 trees should be, and we're talking semi-mature trees, are we? Should be planted to replace that white beam, either in the verge or in the garden of the house. Can you tell me how long it takes for the absorption rate of CO2 of a mature tree? How long it will take for those 3 new trees to catch up with that level of CO2 absorption?
I think you've got me there, Councillor. I wouldn't be able to answer that question.
Is that why we're so concerned about the cutting down of mature trees? Because actually it takes about 20 years for young trees to catch up.
I mean, I'm not sure. I don't know if that's the case. I think in broad terms, we don't take the loss of a tree lightly, and where I conclude that the loss of a tree is justified, as I do in this case, that's in the context of mitigation, which in my view will end up with, in a period of time, a better situation. Because as the tree report says, this tree has a limited life, and although up to 10 years sounds a long time, that's not a long time in terms of tree life. With 3 mature trees planted, they'll be there in 100 years. Thank you.
But the other thing that we heard from Councillor Warwick was that the County Council haven't yet given permission for this tree to come down. Is that a material planning consideration for us, or do we plan ahead anyway?
Well, I wouldn't describe it as planning ahead, but it isn't a material consideration. For this development to occur, the Highway Authority's permission will be required to remove that tree. If the Highway Authority say no, then this development can't take place.
So, if there are no more questions on that, and that includes the Compton and Shoreford Village Design Statement, we've got to page 181, neighbouring amenities. Could I ask a question? I think Parish Councillor brought that up about the noise of vehicles going past the neighbouring house. And she requested, I think, tarmac rather than gravel. But tarmac is not really a sustainable surface, is it?
That's right, Chair. I mean, I would say that, you know, the use of a drive with contained gravel, where it will have an impact, but again, it's the significance of that impact. And with normal residential use, you know, I consider that to be not, you know, something that might be expected in a suburban area like this.
What about the surfaces which are permeable that don't move? You know, so they're not tarmac. I don't know what the technical term for them.
Yeah, well, that would be an option, and I think I'm right in saying we've got a condition attached which is hard and soft landscaping, so those details will be agreed by condition. And that's something perhaps we could explore.
Well, I personally, I don't know how the committee feels, but I personally would like to explore that sort of surface going past the house next door, because that will not be quite so noisy for the occupant of the home. I'm talking about the gatehouse. Members, what do you think?
Yes.
Do we have agreement for that?
Yeah, agreed.
So we'd like that to be, just going in past the house, we'd like it to be a different surface to what is proposed now. Or all of it, could be all of it, I don't know what we're saying. Anything else on neighbouring community? Councillor Roger?
Yes, we would send a list of suggested conditions for the smoke acre from the nearby neighbour who has the elderly disabled husband. She's very concerned about the impact of the construction as well as the impact of the dwelling once it is built. Have you seen this list of suggested conditions, and do you consider that the conditions that we already have cover these reasonably, and if not, are there any of these that you would be happy to accept as extra conditions on the proposal, please?
I think the current conditions do satisfy the normal requirements, and there are no conditions on this list which I have seen which I think would be appropriately taken forward. I mean, I think our general attitude to construction is that, you know, there will be disruption during the construction phase, and that to some extent is unavoidable. But obviously conditions seek to keep that to a minimum.
Thank you.
Sean, I was just looking for a management plan. It might be there, but I've overlooked it for the construction.
No, there isn't one, Chair. We don't routinely have a construction management plan in routinely. Where there are special circumstances that would justify one, i.e. a constricted site where access is difficult or where materials and vehicles can't be accommodated on the site, then we would look to have a construction management plan. This site doesn't particularly have any constraints in that respect, in order that construction vehicles, etc., can be accommodated on the new plot. So there is no construction management plan proposed.
What is the distance between the house, the main house, and the gatehouse?
It's about 40 metres, Chair.
40 metres?
Mm.
Oh. Okay.
Chair, if I could just chip in and point out that at condition 10 we do ask for details of the parking and turning of site operative and construction vehicles during the period of development to be submitted to us. So that, although it's not going as far as a very detailed construction management plan, which wouldn't be reasonable in this case, there is a provision for the parking and turning of site operatives vehicles that we're requiring by condition.
Okay. Right, we're still on page 181, neighbouring amenities we probably have finished with, and then we've got everything to the rest of the report, right base, national park, and so on. Councillor Rutter.
Thank you, Chair. My question is on permitted development rights. Normally in a situation like this, where you're squeezing, although I accept that it's a larger than average plot, nevertheless it's a large house going into a back garden. Is it not reasonable to remove permitted development rights from a house of this type, to give confidence to the neighbours that in due course what is a 4-bedroom house will not become a much bigger house through permitted development without it at least having been considered by our planning officers?
Chairman, if I could just pick that up with you, I think you probably know I say this to you often, and I pulled up the quote from the National Planning Practice Guidance, which talks about whether it's appropriate to use conditions to restrict the future use of permitted development rights. And it says here, and I'll read it to you, conditions restricting the future use of permitted development rights or change of use may not pass the test of reasonableness or necessity. The scope of such conditions needs to be precisely defined by reference to the relevant provisions, so it's clear exactly which rights have been limited or withdrawn. Area-wide or blanket removals of freedom to carry out small-scale domestic and non-domestic alterations that would otherwise not require an application of the planning permission are unlikely to meet the tests of reasonableness and necessity. And I would remind you that in terms of imposing planning conditions, there are 6 tests. In fact, the government says that we should keep conditions to a minimum and only use them when they satisfy the tests. And they are necessary, relevant to planning, relevant to the development to be permitted, enforceable, precise and reasonable in all other respects. Your officer advice on a blanket removal of permitted development rights says it doesn't meet national guidance. And we can only do it therefore when we've got a reasonable approach to do so, and we talked about that on an item this morning where we removed a small aspect of permitted development, and in my view removing blanket permitted development on this site wouldn't pass the test, Chair. As your officer I can recommend that.
I think Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 questions on reference to page 182. Firstly, assuming this tree is removed, will that make any difference to the visibility displays coming out of that drive? You mentioned something about in accordance with the Highway Authority's standing advice. Has one of our people actually looked at that to check that out?
I'm not sure I understand the question. If the authority for the removal of the tree takes place, or is achieved, the tree will be there.
In its place.
That's right, in the vicinity, and I think that would be a matter of negotiation if permission was granted.
Right.
And we would have a view about where those trees would go, and essentially we wouldn't put them in the way of a sight line.
Okay, so that will be taken into account.
Yes.
Okay, good. The next question, back to my old favourites, ecology and biodiversity. From what I can make out, most of your report refers to nitrate, fair enough. It's a new build, clearly there is an issue there. But minimum 10% biodiversity gain, 1 bird box, that 10%.
Chairman, I just remind you that the 10% biodiversity net gain it hasn't come into force yet and won't do so till next year. And we can therefore only apply our current development plan policies at this stage. And in the case of the single dwelling plot, I think we can go on as far as we think is reasonable. We're subject to some tinkering around the edges, Chair.
That's rather a pity considering our climate emergency opinion, and of course praising you, David, for what you did and what you achieved with the Alsford site. It's a pity, therefore, that there's not consideration, but I'll take what you said. I don't like it, but I take
No,
it.
I hear what you say, Chair, and of course the council has declared a climate emergency, and what we're doing at the moment is we're updating our local plan so that we can ensure that we have policies that can factor that in the future. But at the moment, we've got the current development plan, and we can only apply those
Actually, the
planning
definition of
terms.
emergency,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
thank you, Chair.
If I could interject, we do have condition 12, which does talk about a biodiversity enhancement plan, which will be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority prior to the plan. So we are hoping to see a plan which will look at biodiversity enhancement in general. So I'm hoping that our officer will be suggesting all the things that we've discussed all previously, swift boxes, sparrow boxes, hedgehog cones, whatever else.
I mean, in the discharge of conditions with landscaping, with the extra trees, with the biodiversity plan, there's plenty of scope there to, I believe, enhance the value of this site rather than as compared to what it is at the moment.
Councillor Leamy.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions. The first is about transport. This area is only accessed by two roads, Grove Road and South End Road, and they're both very difficult exits onto the main road. And we've seen a large number of houses being built in this area, so we've increased this probably by about 30 to 40 houses over the last few years. And when's the cumulative amount of traffic building up to the point where it cannot cope with it anymore? And I think that's something that we should seriously take into account for this particular area.
Chairman, I think the Highway Authority would tell us when they've reached that point, and they haven't done so as yet. It's an area identified in our development plan as suitable for infill, and the current local plan is subject to review. Maybe that's the opportunity to do that, Chair, probably not on as a result of this application.
The second question I have is about the town water drainage, because there is a problem in that area, particularly with the increasing number of houses. But you're getting flooding from the sewers as you go down Osborne Road, and it is becoming a major problem, so we need to actually take that into consideration as well.
So we've got condition 5, Chair, which asks for detailed proposals for foul and surface water to be submitted for approval by the authority prior to the start of development. So that is something we can testify ourselves. It obviously is a concern that we're aware of when areas having.
Yeah, I mean, what we're really looking at is you've got about 30 or 40 new houses in that particular area, and then as you come out of Grove Road on the other side of the road, you've got the new care home, which is another 60 or 70 areas, and we're already getting flooding from the sewers further down. We need to take that into account because it's not very pleasant having your garden regularly flooded with sewage, as happens at the bottom of the hill.
No, but we do have a condition, so presumably that would be looking at recent events.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just going to add, we did consult with our drainage engineer, who was satisfied on that basis, subject to the condition.
Councillor Reid?
Thank you, Chair. It's, in a sense, going back to Councillor Rutter's question with regard to permitted development rights, and I fully understand what Mrs. Cooper said with regards to in general, but this is a slightly different issue in the sense that everywhere around is in the amenity area of other properties. This is slap bang in the middle. So any additional development to it, even though permitted, is going to have a possible impact on the amenities of the surrounding area. So I'm difficulty saying why this should be slightly different and we should impose.
Chief, can I pick this up? I just let you know that no, that's fine. I'm in a new space. I totally concur with Ms. Pinnock's opinion, and removing permission development rights is definitely the exception. The site is fairly large. If it was appealed on that basis, I would be very surprised if it would win. And you please listen to Julie's tests in respect to the conditions that would be applied.
Could I also bring up the hours of operation? The fact of the very location where this proposed development is going to take place is it going in between residential properties? And surely there should be some hours of operation laid down. I fully understand the parish council for wanting that, because people do not want to wake up on a Sunday morning and find the building yard is underway.
Councillor Reid, it's in the informative, number 6 on page 188.
You can't control it.
No, that's our standard procedure.
This matter is something that our environmental health colleagues are doing. This is a standard informative recommended by them, and should works proceed outside of those hours, that's something they can investigate and follow up in terms of their legislation. And you all know, as committee members here, government advice is very much that we shouldn't look to duplicate controls by other regulatory bodies, which is why we've got the informative one in this case. And it's a proven mechanism that we use, and we engage with our environmental health colleagues regularly on that, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Lots of baskets.
Can I go back to condition 4, the 3 extra heavy standard trees? Presumably that has been agreed with the owner of the main house?
That's correct, Chair, yes. They're very keen to see the development take place. They're aware of the loss of the tree issue,
Yeah.
and hence they've agreed for those proposals to come forward.
Okay. Because if they said no, then the development couldn't go ahead, is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Right, I think, so Councillor Rutter?
Sorry, I've just got, as a matter of clarification, just for me, the 3 houses next door, which are clearly new, Summershaw's, Leon House and Wickham, can you just remind me how many houses they were built in the place of? Do you know? Does anybody know? 1 or 2?
Chair, my recollection is it was 1, but it could be 2, but I think it's more likely 1.
More likely 1.
Well, certainly, some of us from this committee went to that site, didn't we? Looked at that when it was being considered. Yeah.
Thank you. 1. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's the end of questions, so debate. Councillor Rutter?
Thank you, Chair. I am concerned at the loss of a mature tree, but I have been reassured that it is of limited life, that exact tree, and also that there will be at least three trees planted in its place, either in the verge or in the garden of Smoke Acre. Sorry, I was chatting going on. The local plan does have a very strong presumption in favour of more development in this area. And it's a very large garden at Smoke Acre House. And whilst I accept that in that particular very close area there are not any other back garden developments, nevertheless in the wider area there are plenty, and as I've just pointed out, there are 3 houses next door that have taken the place of 1 previously. They're all side by side rather than one in front of the other, but nevertheless, you know, it's maximising the space for housing, which we all know we need more of. I am concerned that we are not allowed to remove permitted development rights from this site, and I understand what Mrs. Pinnock is saying. She's saying effectively that the government says that we can't. So anybody who would like to see us have more flexibility about removing permitted development rights from back garden development, which is what this is, because of the potential impact on neighbours, over which local planning authorities will have no say whatsoever, because permitted developments these days are huge. I urge them to speak to others in authority above us who dictate what we can and cannot accept in terms of planning. So I am unhappy about that, but I have to accept it. So in terms of planning reasons for refusing this, I cannot see that we have a strong enough case for arguing that it impacts on the neighbours, with suitable landscaping agreed and so on. I cannot see that is overdevelopment. It's a very large plot. I cannot see that whilst it may not be exactly in line with the village design statement, nevertheless that dates from 2011 does need updating. And as I say, it's been overtaken by the local plan, which does have a presumption in favour of development in this area. So with some regret and some caution, I am unable to find enough material planning reasons to refuse this, so I will be supporting the author's recommendation.
Right, without wanting to influence your vote either way, Mrs. Pinnock has managed to find, after much searching on her iPad, the plan which Mr. Jobbins referred to. So I have given permission to put that up now, in the light of fairness.
That's not the plan.
I did, it was there because I saw it.
Cool.
Well, team work and share it for some reason. That's one of the photos you want to show the tree, isn't it?
Technology is a wonderful thing, isn't it? Shall we just move on? Oh, what's on? Shall we?
This was the thing that John particularly wanted you to see, which was the, sorry Chair, I don't want to speak for him, but this was the grain plan that I think he wanted you to see, and I just, you know, I think out of fairness,
Can you just orientate us as to the current application?
The application site is down here. And you see the three houses to the right, it's the application site is down here.
I see, okay, yeah.
More of, that was another one of the tree. I think I've managed to get 2 of the 4 tree pictures down, Chair.
Well, the decision on the tree is in the hands of the county. Okay. So, Councillor Laning, you're next on my list.
Thank you. I have a great deal of reservations on this particular application. The site next to it, we turned down the garages with the potential for accommodation above them next door because we didn't want any back developments on this area. This application goes strictly against that we had for the next door plan. I think that taking the tree down actually changes the whole dimension of the street and has a big impact on that. I think it doesn't conform to DM 15, 16 or 17. And therefore I feel quite strongly that I should not support this.
Okay, Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. I disagree with my councillor friend. I think for many reasons this is worthy of support. I think there will be a long-term biodiversity gain with planting of additional trees and replacement of its largely current lawn. I think the back development already exists in the street, almost opposite this house. I've just been looking at Google Maps. There are a substantial number, I think 3 or 4 back development houses, so it's already happening in the road. I think that there is plenty of space between this house and the surrounding houses, so that overlooking and loss of light will be very limited. And it also seems to me that this is a distinctive design which will, whilst invisible from the road, generally contribute to the neighbourhood with its existing, I quote the officer's report, variety of architectural styles. So I have absolutely no problem with this and I should be voting in favour.
Thank you. Any further debate? I don't regret the highway tree particularly because you can see it's quite unstable. And I do think the 3 trees as a replacement will be more than compensatory for the loss of the verge. And you will see it from the public domain as well. You see them from the public domain. It is actually the closeness of Smokeacre to the gatehouse which does concern me. It is quite close, but when I asked it, it is actually a large gap. I'm only 1 metre from my next door neighbour, and that doesn't bother me particularly. But that was why I would quite like the surface of the road there addressed, so that it would try and reduce the noise somewhat. And I, like my colleague Councillor Rutter, I just cannot see a material planning reason to refuse this, so I shall be voting to approve. This application has been recommended for approval. All those in favour, please show.
1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, Chair.
Thank you. And those against?
1, Chair.
And abstaining?
1.
So that application has been approved. Oh, I forgot to mention the extra conditions, but there's... Yes, so sorry. So one is on the update sheet. I'll take another vote again. One is on the update sheet, on the back of our update sheet, and should be added to the zone biodiversity. Then there's going to be an extra condition on the surface of the roadway next to the gatehouse, and I leave that to the officers to sort out as to the length of that. Did I miss anything else on? No. So adding, I'm going to take the vote again. So adding in those 2 extra conditions, all those in favour, please show.
1, 2, 3. Okay, that's 8. 1. Is that you're abstaining?
Abstaining.
8 for 1 abstention.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So that application is approved, and thank you very much, everybody, for coming along. And we have one more paper to do, which is our review of the appeals situation. Don't particularly want to discuss individual appeals, but if anyone thinks there's a lesson for us to learn from this, statistics are quite good, aren't they, Julie? 80% dismissed in favour of the council's decision. Anything else you want to say to us, Julie?
No, I don't think so, Chair. I think the trend in the last quarter, we had 5 decisions, and I think that shows you that the planning inspectorate are trying to sort of catch up on appeals, and we've got not quite a few. We've got some in the pipeline still, and there should be further decisions. So I think it's wanting to catch up this year. As you said, it's 80%, which in terms of our key performance indicator, our aim is to win at least 70%. So it's hard over a quarter. I mean, this quarter, 80% is great. You only need to transition on the other way, so we did measure it over a 2-year rolling period. I don't have those figures this time, but I'm certainly content we're well over 70%, and I probably could make sure I feed that back to you with our next quarterly report. I suppose there's only, all the decisions are interesting, but one was one where was a committee overturn at Warwick Place, which was some retrospective works to the courtyard garden, and that was dismissed as appeal. I think members will be interested to see that, Chair. Please take any questions.
Any other comments, observations? If not, I'll close the committee 3 o'clock. Thank you very much. See you next time.